to all of you to the Ladies Study Group Charitable Trust Annual Award Ceremony. May I please request Mrs. Shumita Roy, our President, and Vice President Mrs. Sujeta Mair to escort Dr. Singhvi to the stage, please. May I please request Mrs. Shumita Roy to felicitate Dr. Singhvi. Mrs. Roy, would you now like to begin the program?
Good morning, everybody. On behalf of Ladies Study Group Kolkata, I welcome Dr. Abhishek Singhvi and is honored to have you serve as our chief guest at Ladies Study Group Annual Charitable Trust Award Ceremony. I also welcome Divya Swami Vidatananda ji from Ramakrishna Shilpa Mandir, Belur. We welcome ICC President Pradeep Sureka and other eminent dignitaries in the audience and our dear members. We'd like to now, Ladies Study Group's most prestigious annual event is the Ladies Study Group Charitable Trust Award Ceremony. It began in 1975 with the institution of Ladies Study Group Charitable Trust and also the initiation of the annual award scheme. The annual award recognizes the outstanding initiative and selfless dedication of charitable institutions and non-government organizations working towards community development and care of the underprivileged. This year's award has been conferred on Ramakrishna Shilpa Mandir, Belur for their outstanding contribution in supporting skill development to improve self-employment opportunities for disadvantaged adults. I now invite Enubala to read the citation.
Good morning, everybody. Ladies Study Group Charitable Trust Annual Award 2021 in recognition of outstanding contribution in supporting skill development to improve self-employment opportunities for disadvantaged young adults. Ramakrishna Mission Shilpa Mandira. Citation. Way back in 1990, Ramakrishna Mission started a War Veterans Industrial Training Institute in Belur, Howrah to rehabilitate the soldiers who had fought in the First World War. This institute grew in scope and scale, and in 1954, it was recognized by the government as an institute that could impart IIT certificates and diplomas in engineering. In 1989, the Community Polytechnic Project was started under Polytechnic College in order to enhance the livelihood prospects of the local youth. In 1992, an information technology enabled services skill development center was started mainly to tide over the Y2K problem. The Community Training Center has 90 National Skill Development Corporation accredited traders, 19 instructors and 774 students enrolled in its various trades. The trained students get placed in various MSMEs in and around Eastern India. The Computer Center has 40 National Skill Development Corporation accredited courses 1,624 students and 30 teachers. Since its inception, Shilpa Mandira, the college, and its two skill development wings has trained over 45,000 youths who are now placed all over the country, either employed under business houses or as self-employed entrepreneurs. We are extremely pleased to present the Ladies Study Group Charitable Trust Award 2021 in well-merited recognition of Ramakrishna Mission Shilpa Mandira's very commendable achievements. Swami Vedatananda ji will receive the award on behalf of Ramakrishna Mission Shilpa Mandira. May I request Swami ji to please come on stage. May I request Dr. Abhishek Singhvi to give away the prestigious annual Charitable Trust Award to Reverend Swami Vedatananda ji of Ramakrishna Shilpa Mandira, Belur. Thank you.
Request Dr. Swami Vedatananda ji to say a few words. Just 1 second, let me just point over.
अरे एरम रख लो हम ना देख लो कुछ
Respected office bearers and members of Ladies Study Group, respected Singhvi ji on the stage, distinguished dignitaries and guests in the audience, I stand here as a courier man to take this award and give it to the people who are actually responsible for the work that is happening there. And on behalf of all of them, I thank Ladies Study Group for having conferred this honor on this work that is going on in Ramakrishna Mission Belur Mutt. This work was started, or rather initiated, by Swami Vivekananda himself. The philosophy of Swami Vivekananda can be summed up in a very short story that I would like to relate to all of you. There was a person in his house doing some serious office work, these work from home issues. He had a small boy, a class 4 or 5 student. His boy was pestering him. Papa, I would like to play with you. He had no time for him right then. He wanted to keep his son engaged for about half an hour. Thereafter, he would come and play with him. So what he did was, he had a map of this country which had all the states delineated. He tore the map along the lines of the states and he gave all those pieces to his son and said, you have studied the map of India geography. It's a puzzle I have created for you. keep them together, make this country whole and bring it back. That is certainly going to take him for half an hour, within which time the father will complete his work. That boy comes back in 3 or 4 minutes. Father is shocked. My son must be a genius. And he says, "Itna jaldi kar liya to?" The son says, "I didn't set the India map right. Behind that page there was the face of a person." You see, it's much easier to set that than to set all these things, because some of these states, if you just turn it around, you can't even recognize what state it is and where it goes in the Indian map. So this is the philosophy on which we work. We set one student, one youth right at a time, hoping that it will reach a tipping point, a critical mass, and then there will be a different future, a new future for this country. Once again, I thank all office bearers of Lady Study Group for having conferred this honor on us. I'm humbled. Thank you, sir.
Now, I will announce about the Shanti Devi Khaitan Award. Shanti Devi Khaitan Award was instituted in the year 2017 to financially support the education of underprivileged girls who show keen interest and commitment towards continuing their studies under this scheme. This year, we have adopted 3 girl students at the Woodlands College of Nursing to support their training here through required funding from the Ladies Study Group Charitable Trust. Donations 2021. Over the more than 50 years of our existence, Ladies Study Group has stood strongly by society. We have made the best efforts to react promptly in emergency situations, provide timely help to people in distress through our donations. We feel both honored and humbled to have made a brief total donation of over 30 lakhs of rupees in the financial year 2021-22. Financial support has been provided to charitable organizations and institutions like Disha Foundation for the education of underprivileged children, IHA Foundation to help procure oxygen concentrator and cylinders during the second wave of COVID-19 in Kolkata, MCK's Food for the Hungry Foundation to support their sewing training school, Medica Super Speciality Hospital to vaccinate 500 NGO workers and field workers against COVID, Responsible Charity Society Education and Care of Underprivileged Children, Sharoj Gupta Cancer Center and Research Institute to help purchase medical equipments, Shuktara to help with education, nutrition and healthcare of physically challenged, destitute children, South Kolkata Hamari Muskan to support education of children of sex workers, St. Paul's Cathedral to provide midday meals at their school for street children. As promised to our members, we have again used a part of the membership subscription fees received for 2021 to contribute towards supporting distressed and disadvantaged citizens as extensively as possible. We wholeheartedly thank all our members for their continued support in helping us stand by people in their unfortunate times. Now, I feel honored to introduce our eminent chief guest, Dr. Abhishek Singhvi. Congratulations, Dr. Singhvi, for the prestigious appointment of the chair of the Parliament's most important Committee of Home. Congratulations. That has just been announced yesterday. He is a senior three-term sitting MP, a former chairman, Parliamentary Standing Committee of Law and Justice, India's youngest designated Queen's Counsel at the age of 34, and youngest additional Solicitor General at the age of 37. Senior serving national spokesperson of the Congress Party and the former Vice President of the Supreme Court Bar Association. His columns in top dailies have been published in 2 books with the forewords by the former Indian Prime Minister, and his definitive legal analysis of the law of emergency powers was released recently by the present Indian Supreme Court, Chief Justice and 3 other Supreme Court judges. Awarded the Global Leader for Tomorrow Award by World Economic Forum Davos in 1999, he has been the opening lead speaker for the Treasury of Congress benches in Parliament for all major debates and has appeared in landmark Supreme Court cases. He has served on parliamentary committees of privileges, urban affairs, law and justice, and defense. His significant charitable contributions include a standalone center for destitute children, the Singhvi Scholarship at Trinity College, Cambridge, a COVID oxygen express van, and large contributions to Supreme Court Bar. Dr. Singhvi taught India at the School Living Indian School Examination and did BA from St. Stephen's College and MA and PhD from Trinity College, Cambridge, UK. He also taught at St. John's College, Cambridge, and did a brief summer program from Harvard, USA. May I now request Dr. Singhvi to address the august gathering.
Ms. Sumita, distinguished office bearers of this distinguished organization, all the past and current dignitaries of this organization, my colleague in the Rajya Sabha, Mr. Pradeep Bhattacharya, whose insistent request I could never say no to, Swamiji, many other distinguished members of the Calcutta Special Society, ladies and gentlemen. It is of course overwhelming to find such a powerful Nari Shakti gathering. It is intended to make speakers of the opposite sex speechless. That's not easy to do, both for a lawyer and a spokesperson. But I think your organization has partially achieved it today. But it is good to know that such an old Chambers of Commerce, with an almost equally old ladies segment of it, doing so many diverse activities and being so vibrant and pulsating and so entrenched in good work in this part of India. In particular, it is uplifting to start the program by recognizing the social work which we have just recognized. Ramakrishna Mission, of course, epitomizes, symbolizes selfless service for decades, indeed over a century. And Vivekananda was a seer and a savant, the likes of which India is never likely to see again. Unfortunately, as they say, those whom the gods love die young. I've had the privilege of doing many activities in diverse fields. I always joke that multitasking is the joy of my life and also the bane of my life. But frankly, nothing quite gives that much pleasure as the Center for destitute children which we run in Delhi, or for that matter the partly means-based test scholarship at Cambridge, or the COVID ambulance van, these are really satisfying moments in the noise and chaos of usual daily living. In particular, something which was scrapped in between but has fortunately been restarted. I am proud that MPLAD, Member of Parliament's Local Area Development Funds, can, and there are of course always aberrations and allegations of misuse, but if properly utilized can be a remarkably beneficial tool for social welfare. I had the privilege of being 12 years Member of Parliament from Rajasthan. I have of course now defected to West Bengal. But in those 12 years, I have 399 projects devoted exclusively to two areas, health and education, all over Rajasthan. As you know, cover only that state. We cannot go outside of that state. And they are focused on health and education, only two areas advisedly chosen by me. And in the 5 western districts of Rajasthan, Jodhpur, Jaisalmer, Barmer, Jalore, Pali, etc. Possibly the most deprived sections. And when I allocated those funds, it was astonishing to find that simple things which we take for granted, like a dialysis machine, is not available for the entire western part of Rajasthan except one machine in Jodhpur. Jodhpur is of course a major town, but there are 6 districts west of Jodhpur all the way to the Pakistan border, 5 districts. And none of them have that. So digital X-ray machines, newborn babies centers, cardiac centers. There's a stretch near Pali, 20 kilometers, which is certified as one of the most accident-prone stretches in the whole of India. And hardly any ambulance services worth the name are available there. These are truly satisfying activities. And the Vice President of India, Mr. Naidu, did me the privilege of releasing a booklet on these 399 projects spread across the length and breadth of these 5 western districts just a few months ago. Well, friends, I am here today to address you on the theme of pillars of Indian democracy. So the first legitimate question would be why this theme? Why this theme? I think it's particularly apposite at all times to have a theme like this. But it cannot be more apposite than the 75th year of our Republican birth. And as Palkiwala said, you must underline the obvious, otherwise it is frequently taken for granted. We tend to take many of these things for granted, but it is important to remind, revive, underline the pillars of Indian democracy, the elements which we cherish, and that reminder acts as a bulwark against the weakening or the dilution of those pillars or those values which are intrinsic to democracy. And therefore that vigilance, that awareness is a very small price to pay for protecting what is a much bigger canvas. I have profitably started many addresses, especially to foreign audiences, but also to Indian ones, with a fundamental question, a question which is so remarkably simple and yet not capable of simple answers. And I always like to test it on new audiences. So let me start with that question. The question is, why, but why out of the 30 odd or 40 odd countries emerging from the yoke of imperialism between 1930s and 1960s, from Belgian imperialism, from French imperialism, from British imperialism, so many forms of imperialism. Roughly 30 odd countries which emerged in these 2.5, 3 decades. Why is it that India and India alone has remained a democracy? It's a fascinating topic, it's a fascinating question, because you turn around your head in any direction and you'll find the wrecks and ruins of constitutionalism littering the landscape of all those countries who, along with us, or a few years before or a few years later, emerged from imperialism. They are littered across the landscape of Africa, Asia, Australasia, South America, and yet India remains the only democracy, in particular the size and magnitude of India. Not a single of the other countries has remained there. And that question therefore is why? And that, by the way, covers also our so-called Southeast Asian and Asian tigers. It of course covers all the 7 countries in what we know as the South Asian region, or the SAARC region. Now when they ask that question, I don't get very quick or easy answers, and it's something to reflect upon, but when I ask the question to myself, equally I have no satisfactory answer. The first answer is sheer good luck. That's a candid but a correct answer. Now if I was forced to give a second answer, the second answer would be from my side, and certainly each of you can have different answers. That's the beauty of this question. Possibly India got the sequencing right. We got a Gandhi before a Nehru. I always joke, without meaning any disrespect to these giants, that a reverse sequencing might have been disastrous. Gandhi is possibly the most remarkable agitational politician, and certainly no one on planet Earth could have got us independence, and that too by non-violent means, except a person or a persona like Gandhi. But equally, I'm not sure if Gandhi would have made a good Prime Minister. And you had the Liaqats and the Jinnahs, and you had the Bandanaikes, but you had Nehru in India, following upon Gandhi. Therefore, I think we got the sequencing without intention right. If Gandhi was the ideal agitational politician to get us independence, Nehru was again that Fabian, left of center, romantic socialist, but with a genuine, deep-rooted faith in democracy, which was vital in the nascent and formative years of the Indian Republic. To dig our roots deep, to create institutions which have stood the test of time and become pillars. I'm not talking of transient politics. I consider people who daily lambast many icons as part of their political visit to their mill as pygmies who have not quite understood what India went through pre-47 and what India went through in the first 10-15 years after 47. And I think that sequencing is what made India remain a democracy unlike all its neighbors, unlike all of those who emerged from the yoke of imperialism. Of course, he's got a very impish sense of humor. He's supposed to have ordered a set of 2 dentures just before embarking upon a fast unto death. So let me, friends, now turn with that backdrop and that fundamental question answered to the best of my ability, and leaving each of you to find your own answer, to the pillars of Indian democracy. And the pillars of Indian democracy include both institutional pillars and non-institutional pillars of Indian democracy. And possibly the non-institutional pillars are even more vital and important than the institutional pillars. But they're all pillars of Indian democracy. The first of these is clearly secularism. And secularism must be looked at in a much broader context than all the chick-chick we hear today, all the cacophony and the chaos of the debate which we hear today. India is planet Earth's most diverse spot. I sometimes am amused when Americans talk of salad bowl or melting pot. If they see the diversity of India, they would blush with the smallness of their melting pot or salad bowl. India has roughly, and this count is always changing, 22 scheduled languages, 700 mother tongues, 2,000 dialects, the largest population on planet Earth of 4 religions, the second largest population of 1 minority, the largest number of races, smells, sounds, food, dress, rituals, smells. And in this context, secularism is not a largesse which I give to you. It is actually a self-protective mechanism. You cannot hold together this diversity without this first pillar of Indian democracy, which is secularism. I've always believed that India is like a kite. If you pull too much at the beginning, it snaps. As you know, the real smart kite flyer lets go. And the more you let go, the more it soars. So, there was a professor, Indian professor at Harvard, I think he's now retired, Rajiv Bhargava, who gave a rather interesting definition of secularism. He said Lincoln used the words for democracy, of the people, by the people, for the people. So he said, Lincoln, I can understand saying for the people. I can also understand saying by the people. But why on earth did he use the word of the people? And then Bhargava answers the question which he raises himself by saying, of the people is to give you a sense of shared participatory co-ownership in democracy. It is like each of you is part and me is part of one common joint family where each of us has some co-parsonage rights on Indian democracy. And unless you are able to convey to each one of you that you are co-sharers, co-participants and co-enjoyers of some element of democracy, you cannot govern a country as diverse as India. And conversely, the moment you erode that even slightly by trust deficits or divisiveness, you are actually creating a Frankenstein monster, which is very difficult to control. Remember also that secularism, by the way, was not used in our preamble of the Constitution, though it's clearly a pillar of Indian democracy. But it goes along with 2 other words used in the preamble, which are all linked together. And those 2 words are fraternity, a usually forgotten word, and equality. These 3 words, therefore, cross-fertilize each other. They are interdependent. They are part of a holistic whole. When Mrs. Indira Gandhi inserted secularism in 1976 in our constitution, there was a big furor. Why should it be inserted in the preamble? Either it is already there or it is a political gimmick. I think nobody denies before 76 and after 76 that secularism is part of the basic structure of the Indian Constitution. By the way, basic structure is a remarkable doctrine. It's the pride of India and the envy of the world, and now many countries have imitated it, copied it. As you know, imitation is the best form of flattery. Basic structure is such a remarkable doctrine that even a constitutional amendment can, in India, be declared unconstitutional. So a constitutional amendment is and can be unconstitutional if it is found to be violative of a higher standard called basic structure. And clearly secularism is part of that basic structure. It's a non-derogable jewel and rightly therefore put in the preamble, although belatedly. It seeks to not impose uniformity upon diversity. That is the problem of misunderstanding. It seeks to have unity in diversity, not uniformity upon diversity. And ultimately, it is, as I said, a sense of ownership and participatory democracy which holds and strengthens the republic, which is why it's a clear pillar of Indian democracy, though a non-institutional pillar. It is in a sense, in a distant sense, typified in that famous phrase by a German who wrote a poem many decades ago. You know that well. He said, when they came for the Jews, I did not get up and speak. When they came for the Christians, I did not speak. When they came for my neighbors, I did not speak. When they came for me, there was no one left to speak for me. So unless we remember these lessons of history, we shall be condemned to repeat it. My second pillar of Indian democracy is another remarkable pillar, federalism. Federalism, astonishingly, is not a word used anywhere in the world's largest or second or third largest constitution, which is what the Indian constitution is. You'll be astonished, the whole constitution of India doesn't use the word federalism. It has the word federal, which is a misleading word because it's talking of the federal court. Federal court was the predecessor of the Supreme Court before independence. So that has nothing to do with federalism. And despite not being used anywhere in the constitution, it has been held repeatedly to be part of the basic structure of the Indian constitution. In other words, if you can show that even a constitutional amendment is derogating from a fundamental tenet of federalism, that constitutional amendment, which is the highest form of amendment, can itself be declared unconstitutional because basic structure is because federalism is part of basic structure. There is also a fascinating story about federalism. That you must remember that when our founding fathers sat down together to draft this remarkable document, and actually, whenever you have time, you should just flip through some pages of the Constituent Assembly debates. Each week, just a few pages. It's quite a remarkable thought that amidst all the chaos, the mayhem, the 15 lakh or 20 lakh people displaced, the mass killings, the trains coming with bloodied bodies, this group of 300, 400 people sat at the Constituent Assembly for 3 long years, from 46 to November 49, committing to values which were antithetical to that which was happening outside the Assembly. But when they sat down and they discussed, they were very, very scared people. They were worried because of vociferous tendencies, the fear that India would break up. You have to rewind yourself back into that room of 46 to 49. And there was no guarantee that India would stay together. And they therefore thought that we have to take every possible safeguard to prevent disintegrating tendencies of the Indian Republic. And therefore they created, and this is another fascinating story, they created the Indian Republic largely unitary, not federal. Largely unitary with some federal features, some apologies to federalism. Not because they didn't want federalism, there are large parts of the nation we must have federalism, but we can't take the chance. Large parts of the country will break away. And therefore at that time a Australian jurist who used to teach at Oxford, Kenneth Weir, he studied the Constitution of India and in 47 said, well, this is basically a unitary constitution, but I will call it a quasi-federal constitution. So it's a small apology to federalism. True federal constitutions are the ones like US or partly some other countries, because those are countries which depend on pre-existing states which were nations. Louisiana was a country, Texas was a country. There were so many countries there, full-fledged sovereign countries. They gave up their power to become one United States of America. So today you find that federal spirit. The central government has very little power, but the states of USA have all the powers because they have not given up their powers. They were pre-existing countries. In India, you imposed a unitary system, partly out of fear of disintegration. But the remarkable story, which I was about to start on, is not what I've said. It is this, that from a conception in 1950, 46 to 49 to be precise, of our founders, of India as a completely unitary or largely unitary in conception, in design, in drafting. The fascinating story is that in 75 years, we have had humongous inadvertent federalism, accidental federalism, unintended federalism it is called. So in operation, the Indian constitution today is maybe 10 times more federal than our framers ever imagined or intended it to be. And that by itself is a fascinating story. I'll try to summarize it, but I can't leave it all together. There are 6 facets which led to this unintended federalism. 6 known but not quite pinpointed, and therefore it's useful to pinpoint them. The first was linguistic federalism. In the 50s, when we created language-based states, the Gujarat out of Maharashtra or other states in India, you had linguistic federalism. Because federalism is a concession to regional aspirations. It's like a pressure cooker which acts to control dissent, dissatisfaction, and discomfort. It acts as a safety valve at lower levels of decentralized governance. So, linguistic federalism, many of us don't remember that in the 60s you used to have language riots. Fortunately, occasionally now that debate is starting, but fortunately we don't have language riots. And then you created the linguistic states and you gave the 3-language formula in the 60s, which has stood the test of time. So linguistic federalism was the first major federating influence, not created by our founders, but in actual practice created decentralization. The second was vigorous judicial review. One of the most intrusive non-federal, anti-federal provisions in the Indian Constitution made by our framers to control disintegration is Article 356, what you call President's Rule, because you take over a state's administration. There were 100 invocations of President's Rule from independence till 1999. To be precise, till 2000 there were 99 invocations. After 2000, there have been hardly 10 or 12 or 14, and most of which I happen to have appeared. The reason is not that politicians have become angels or parties have changed their objects. The reason is that there is vigorous judicial review which is prompt, which is intrusive, and which restores status quo ante. The most famous President's Rule case is Bommai. Poor Bommai, who filed the case in Karnataka on behalf of Hegde, who was displaced as the chief minister, won the case after 4 years. By then, Hegde had gone twice over and 3 governments had changed. So Hegde never lived to see the fruits of that judgment. However, vigorous judicial review in the last 15 years, after Bommai, by the way, is the case which also held federalism to be part of the basic structure of the Indian Constitution. After Bommai, you had Karnataka 1, Karnataka 2, the midnight hearing you heard about. I had the privilege of arguing the midnight hearing. You had Maharashtra, Uttarakhand, Madhya Pradesh, Goa, Arunachal. So many cases where President's Rule was attempted, but was quickly, promptly acted upon by the court within weeks. So the status quo ante, either this way or that way, was restored, and the fruits of the illegality could not be enjoyed. And therefore, you now have lesser and lesser invocations of 356, although the threats are always there. So that's the second major pro-federal federating influence, making India much more federal than intended by our constituent framers. The third, of course, and the most important opportunity is Panchayati Raj, and of course Municipal Raj. By the 73rd and the 74th constitutional amendments, with effect from 1993, based on the Singhvi report on revitalization of Panchayati Raj, a constitutional amendment led to a silent revolution. Today, as a member of parliament, and not so much in Bengal because I came to Bengal almost on the cusp of COVID, but in Rajasthan, when I go and sit for any of my MP projects, 70, 60, 80% of the time, the person sitting across me is a lady. She's a chairman of a panchayat, she's a president of a panchayat, she's a samiti panchayat. There are today 20 lakh lady office bearers in Panchayati Raj, 2 million. Panchayats have full power to decide कि bridge यहाँ बनेगा, school ये नहीं बनेगी, school room यहाँ बनेगा, अस्पताल इधर होगा. This is decentralization, because federalism is decentralization. And this degree, just like people know that you have 3 lists for central power, state power and concurrent power, there are similar lists between state and panchayats. So there are some subjects which only panchayats can decide, not the state government. And that has truly been operationalized after our 72nd and 73rd amendments. The fourth is economic liberalization. Whether you call it 1991 or you call it 1985, economic liberalization has meant that the states have become relatively much more decentralized than the center. You ask, and you're all industrialist connected families, you ask your relatives, husbands, brothers, or you ask yourselves who are actually running industries, the necessity for you to travel to Delhi has become 1/10 of what it used to be prior to 1991. A cabinet minister in the central cabinet and a chief minister are the same rank. But in actual fact, a cabinet minister in central government is now 1/3 or 1/4 as powerful as a chief minister. Because the center has very limited powers. They've decentralized, delicensing. And therefore, states have become stronger and the entire requirement to apply for anything to the center has become less. The fifth federating influence is fiscal federalism. So linguistic, judicial, panchayati raj, economic liberalization. And the fifth is fiscal federalism. For decades, the amount of grants and monies devolved. As you know, there's a system by which if the center collects 100 rupees, it devolves some portion to the states. Otherwise, the states can't run. For decades, the amount devolved used to be in the range of 30, 32, 33%. So if the center collects 100 rupees as taxes or other forms of collection, in grants and devolutions taken together, they used to give back 30-odd percent to the states. That figure is now 45, 44% or 43%, likely to reach 45% shortly. So 45% of fiscal devolution and fiscal federalism, ultimately money matters more than anything else. And money given back to the states. And this is behold all the debates we have that you haven't got GST compensation, you haven't got this. Those are relevant debates, but as a broad principle, the secular average has increased from 30-32% to 43-44%. And the last is what we don't like to hear in our drawing rooms, we consider chaotic, regional parties. We find it very disturbing. There's no unity, there's no strength, there is no uniformity, there is no discipline. What are these regional parties? They're always doing chick all over the place. But regional parties are the backbone of federalism. They are the vehicles of regional aspirations. They allow explosions to be better controlled at the regional level. As somebody put it, they quarantine conflicts. It's a valuable word now in these COVID times. They quarantine conflicts at sub-regional or regional levels, and they don't allow it to explode at the center. So regional parties are a very important part, and they have really started in India in a big way only after 1991. So there are 6 unintended federalist influences, which neither Ambedkar nor our framers could have fully foreseen, which gives rise to this interesting phrase used by scholars that India has been a case of accidental, unintended federalism. My next pillar of Indian democracy is Parliament. Parliament, you must remember that we are not a democracy. We are a parliamentary democracy. There are 2 words there, not 1 word. We tend to say democracy, we forget the other word, parliamentary. Good, bad or indifferent, we have adopted it from the mother parliament, British. And it is very important to keep the spirit of that alive. It is not the building which is the pillar of Indian democracy, it is the spirit of that concept which is the pillar of Indian democracy. I have had the privilege of now being a sitting MP for 3 terms. When we sit in Central Hall, which is said to be the biggest gossip place on earth, be it women's gathering, men's gathering or mixed gathering, there is no better place to gossip than Central Hall. You have a remarkable bonhomie which is the spine of democracy. So you have a Rajnath Singh sitting here, a Dinesh Trivedi sitting here, Abhishek Singhvi sitting here. And the rule in Central Hall was, used to be till recently, that whatever you say is automatically off the record, unless you specifically say that it will be put on the record. The young journalists who come now don't know these rules and therefore they lose out. But that was the essence. Now that can't happen in the Central Hall with the two ladies in Bangladesh. It can't happen in Central Hall with Nawaz Sharif or Zia-ul Haq or the others in Pakistan Central Hall. It still happens today in India. That is the spine, the spirit, the concept of parliamentary democracy, where a Vajpayee can telephone and hand over gracefully to a Manmohan Singh or vice versa. I think this is something you have to cherish, but you take it for granted because it's the obvious. Which is, I said, sometimes you have to restate the obvious. That is why also I am a very old and a strong votary, speaking many times and writing many times about the trust deficit, the distrust, which has arisen over the past several years, and I'm not talking politics, between this camaraderie, within the camaraderie of Central Hall. You don't have to and should not be looking over your shoulder regarding whom you are talking to, or what you are saying will be reported to Orwell's Big Brother. That is the strength of Indian democracy, which is why it's a pillar. Also, it's important to remember that Parliament at work is Parliament at committee, or Parliament in committee is Parliament at work. For every big chair-throwing, disruption, screaming, shouting, jumping and dancing on tables you see on your television channels, you do not see the solid work being done in committee. I had the privilege of being a chairman of a law standing committee more than 11 years ago. And yesterday I had the privilege of being appointed chairman of possibly Parliament's most important committee, Home Affairs. There are roughly 30 to 31 members in each committee. They are called mini parliaments. And the 31 members cover a spectrum of all the parties which are also in the House. And there are X from Rajya Sabha, Y from Lok Sabha. And there are divisive topics. When I chaired it in 2011, we did the Lokpal. There could be nothing more divisive than the Lokpal. You'll be astonished, and you can pick up the report and see it was a hugely divisive debate outside. But inside our committee, we identified and I framed 25 issues. On 22, we had unanimity. In 2, we had dissents of 2-3 people. In 1, we had dissent of 1. For a topic like Lokpal, it's amazing. That doesn't happen when you take the bill to the House, the main House. There people start following their political colours. Some of these reports are scholarly. Some of these reports are wealth of material. But these are not available. They are not read by you. Obviously, they are not seen in television cameras. By the way, they should never be seen by television cameras. You know, when the proposal came to televise parliamentary proceedings many years ago, a few years after that, when Hamid Ansari was the Vice President, the proposal also came to televise parliamentary committee proceedings. I opposed it and he opposed it stronger, more than me. He said the moment you start televising committee proceedings, you will have the same drama-bazi, as I put it, inside the committee. In fact, there was a not very non-serious proposal to even stop televising parliamentary proceedings themselves, because some of the members said that, look, we have to be seen doing something very aggressive inside Parliament by our constituents back home. Otherwise, who will take us seriously? Therefore, as I said, Parliament at work is Parliament at committee, Parliament at committee is Parliament at work, and we must preserve that. And we must preserve the bipartisanship which you find in parliamentary committees, largely till now. Of course, as I said, as per the Beatles song, the times they are changing. But compared to other fora, that bipartisanship is still significant. There is one major problem with parliamentary democracy, this pillar of our Indian democracy, with parliamentary democracy, and that is that whole issue of criminalization of politics. It's actually a very simple debate, which could have been ended years ago, but it's because we don't want to end it. We keep on saying, how should you deal with criminalization? Now obviously the mere filing of an FIR by me against her cannot lead to a disqualification, because you can file an FIR at the drop of a hat. And you cannot deprive a legislator of her right to be active by saying, I filed an FIR, therefore you can't stand for any election. Equally, if you say that we can punish her only when she gets a conviction against her, a conviction in India is the closest thing to eternity. So what you need is a simple amendment to the rule, to the law, of 2 lines to 4 lines, that neither an FIR is sufficient to disqualify nor a conviction is necessary to disqualify. You need to simply say that when charges are framed by a court in a specified list of serious offences, you can choose the offences, murder, rape, kidnapping, whatever. In a specified list of offences, not when the FIR is filed, not when charge sheet is filed, but when charges are framed by the court, then it will lead to disqualification. That small little amendment of 4 lines has not happened, and seminars keep on going on this subject. The next pillar of Indian democracy, clearly a massive pillar, is the judiciary. And it is a most remarkable pillar of Indian democracy. It is something in which you continue to have the most faith, good, bad, and indifferent. There are lots of vitiating factors there, but you have faith more than any other organ of governance in that pillar. It is something which is, we have the best and the brightest in that sector. Our judges and lawyers are the best and the brightest globally compared. They have invented and operationalized doctrines which are avant-garde, which are so progressive and novel and inventive that they've been copied in the rest of the world. I mentioned one basic structure. The second one is PILs. There are so many more. And judicial review, when Mavri and Madison, Chief Justice Marshall in the US, is supposed to have started in 1802. There's a big furor about how USA has got judicial review. The judicial review which our judges exercise would make all US judges blush. There is no area which is immune from Indian judicial review. But having said all these great things about judiciary, there are twin evils. And as you can see, I am, of course, doing the role of a fan dancer. Because when you are dealing with pillars of Indian democracy and have to finish before 12:25, 12:30, you can only touch upon a subject without really covering it, which is what a fan dancer does. But the twin evils besetting this sector of the judiciary, one is arrears, and one is the increasing number of cases. And we keep on having, just today, the Chief Minister of various states, including this state, are in Delhi to have the annual Chief Justices and Chief Ministers Conference. And there the alarming figure published in the newspapers is that during COVID, the pendency has increased from roughly 3 crores, or rather 2.5 crores, or 3 crores, to 4.8 crores. Of which, of course, 3 crores is in the lowest level trial courts, 50 to 70 lakhs. 70 lakhs is all the high courts put together, about 1 lakh in the Supreme Court. This is the scourge and the bane. It can sustain a lecture by itself. I don't have time to deal with it. There are some very simple things which can cure it. We don't seem to be capable of implementing those simple things. For example, it's like having excellent hospitals, buildings with equipment, but no doctors. How can you cure patients if you have no doctors? So, in a country of 125 crores, we have roughly 1100 judges put together, all the high courts put together. That's the strength. A remarkable statistic is that in the last 75 years, there has never been a period, never ever, when at least 1/3 of them have not been vacant. So in a country of 125 crores, the total strength of 1100 high court judges, you have roughly 300 to 400 always vacant. That's the doctor-judge example. So you need to appoint. In India, we are able to easily find out the most suitable appointees in, for example, Calcutta. The problem is that after we find out the most suitable appointees, we start politics to disappoint the appointees. So we don't appoint and we keep vacancies. We don't do a quantum assessment when we pass laws. 498A and 138 are two laws passed decades ago. It has now come full circle and Parliament is reviewing whether to abolish it or dilute it. Because in 498A, the first victim is the 98-year-old grandmother-in-law. The second victim is the grand aunt of 91 years old. The third victim is the mother-in-law. Now, those cases have clogged with hardly any convictions our entire system. 138, which was supposed to, has led to people, I of course stopped being on any board of any company for the last 40 years. I was on a board of a company in the 80s. But most people are not ready to be a board of any company because of 138, where a check bounce can theoretically land you in jail. These are laws which when passed, we don't do a quantum assessment. You know, each of our bills in Parliament have a financial assessment at the back of the bill. The last bill of the bill says, the financial impact of this law is likely to be X crores, which is proposed to Parliament. There is no quantum assessment, how many new cases is going to generate. And that has led to clogging. You have, of course, means to take it out of the system by subjecting this like a bypass surgery or an artery which is clogged. You take things out of the legal artery and subject it to alternative dispute resolution, ADR, mediation, conciliation, arbitration, etc. Some of your chambers does it. But that has again not been very successful in India because arbitration in India has become pre-litigation litigation. So you do full round of arbitration, then you start litigation. The next pillar, as you see, that I am just touching upon it, I'm not really covering, there are so many more things I can talk about the judicial sector. The next major pillar is media, called the fourth estate. The one organ of democracy not mentioned specifically in the constitution, but for decades, Article 19(1)A has been interpreted to mean freedom of speech, but also freedom of press. Although the word in the constitution is speech, not press. This is possibly the most powerful and the most unaccountable. You know, I always said, and the late lamented Jetli and I used to walk out and always say that you are the public life people subjected to the maximum accountability, good, bad or indifferent. Anybody in public life, the kind of declarations we have to file and how the press attacks you in public life every day is quite remarkable. But the same accountability does not apply to several other organs of governance, and that includes judiciary and media. Have you ever seen the judiciary and the media being subjected to even partially that accountability to which these very organs subject others in the political class? Nowhere near. The media has become more sensationalism, less sense, or less sense and more sensationalism. You have, at last counted, this is probably understating it by 20%, 400 plus channels, 515 channels, 400 plus dailies, print dailies, 500 million peak time viewership, 872 permitted satellite channels, and so on. So imagine the humongous power and reach of this organ. Accountability is zero. Let me give you 2-3 examples. First of all, the accountability is, and we borrowed this quaint, antiquated concept of peer accountability from England. So doctors must judge the doctor, so you have the Medical Council of India. It was found to be the most corrupt body. Press people must judge press people, so you created the Press Council of India. I have written many times for decades, and I said so that the Press Council is accepted to be not even a toothless tiger. Because at least a toothless tiger roars, it doesn't bite. The Press Council does neither. And how can you possibly control this juggernaut called the media with a toothless Press Council? There is a broadcasting bill pending in India for last 22 years or 25 years. But there is an incestuous conspiracy of silence. Nobody wants to pass it. The broadcasting bill was introduced 25 years ago. It tried, not that it's going to be fully, it tried to create Chinese walls. between ownership, conflict of interest, and other media interests, which is the heart of the problem. But it has not seen the light of the day because it doesn't suit a large segment of society which operates in that segment. And therefore, the other big fraud continues. Do you know how the entire media is run? It's a very simple fact, and I'm running out of time, but I have to tell you this. There are roughly about 35 to 37,000, maybe 40,000 meters installed across the country. The figure changes from 35 to 45. Let's take 40,000 meters in a country of 125 crores. That meter is supposed to measure the peak time viewing. That is this great TRP lady. TRP determines all those scrolls you see. I am the most successful channel for the 7 to 8 slot. I am the most successful for the 8 to 9 slot. Determined by this TRP. And that TRP in turn determines advertising revenue. And advertising revenue in turn determines content. So it's a juggernaut where the entire system is flawed. The more sensationalism you do, the more TRP you are able to get. And the more TRP you get, the more advertising revenue you get. And that same advertising revenue then completes the circle and injects more sensationalism in the content. Now, imagine the public class, parliament, members of parliament, ministers doing the same thing. The media would strip them naked every day. But who will guard the guardians? Who will guard the media? Of course, I always believe, and that's a subject for a much wider talk, the biggest threat to free speech is not external censorship. The biggest threat to free speech is the compulsion to conform. Each one of us is compelled to conform to a design or an idea which is set up for us. We must say and do that which we think the media will appreciate. Not what is right, not what is honest, brutal truth, but what you think. So sometimes, my own personal theory is that a man as harebrained as Trump succeeded in USA because he never followed the compulsion to conform. He did call a spade a spade. My last two, and I'm ending in 5 minutes, I assure you. This is our lawyer's promise. The last 2 or 3 organs are equally important, no less important. One is the Election Commission, the next is the CAG, and the next is the Army. And I'll take them all 3 together and end on that. The Election Commission is India's pride and the world's enemy. I have said to many Chief Election Commissioners that if you are allowed to outsource your services, you would get the biggest consultancy projects in the world. Because every country wants to have elections done through the Election Commission of India, but they have a limitation to going out and outsourcing and helping other countries doing it. After all, the size and the logistics of an Indian election to get it done earlier by paper and now by electronic is massive, is humongous, is unbelievable. And therefore, these 3 institutions have to be independent. Why? Remember, free and fair vote is the heart of democracy. And democracy is part of the basic structure. So any vitiating factor, non-level playing fields, allowing one political party to get away with slanted non-level playing fields, allowing vitiating practices during an election campaign. All these affect free and fair one man, one woman vote. And that effect has a direct effect on democracy. So actually that little small thing called the EC is an upholder of the basic structure doctrine of democracy itself. And therefore, I believe that we have to stop and ban completely post-retirement appointments after you've served any of these 3. I'm not talking politics, all political parties are complicit and guilty. But if you've been on the Election Commission, you should be barred for life from any post-retirement sinecure or appointment. And the same should apply to a CAG and to the Army Chief. The Army is like the old days. The strongest person in a family used to be the Parda Nashin lady. She was the pillar of strength to the family. The army in India is strong as long as it is a Pardhanasheen lady. It's a pillar in the background which you don't think of. The moment you start thinking of the army, then it is the beginning of the end. It's the start of the Ayub Khans and the Yahya Khans of our neighborhood. You cannot have these people having any jobs after they retire. You cannot have a CAG who's a grand inquest of the nation. They are all, two of them are constitutional posts, EC and CAG. Army, of course, not a constitutional post. But these have to be fiercely guarded as vital pillars of Indian democracy, and every possible vitiating factor to undermine their independence has to be stoutly resisted. It has happened for decades now, although not in very large numbers, that you've dangled carrots and lollipops post-retirement. As they say, post-retirement lollipops affect pre-retirement activity. So it's time that we put a ban on it. You can increase the age, you can increase the emoluments, but just put a ban on this so that no party, as long as you have an option, either I will do it or he will do it. So it's time we stop that. Well, friends, in conclusion, apart from pleading guilty to be a fan dancer, and quite frankly, the nature of the topic forces me to be that, I think our vision of our democracy is remarkable, it's excellent. We have a lot to crib about, but we have much more to be happy about. What we need to do is to improve in the nitty-gritty. As Thomas Hardy said, you take care of the small things, the big things will take care of themselves. And we need to make the core of our system shine by taking away the flotsam and the jetsam, by removing the chaff from the wheat. As both Tagore and Gandhi said, that when you try to do that reform of democracy, the pillars of Indian democracy, you may not find many followers. You will not find many people. Then the only one path is Ekla Chalo. Ekla Chalo is the answer of these greats, and Ekla Chalo works in life. Iqbal put it rather well. In another form, another theme, another way of putting the same sentiment as Ekla Chalo. मैं अकेला ही चला था जानिबे मंजिल, मैं अकेला ही चला था जानिबे मंजिल, लोग आते रहे और कारवां बनता रहा. So if you decide to follow that path, you will find that what happened to Gandhiji, what he recited, will happen at many stages, but ultimate victory will be yours. And Gandhiji said that all reform must pass through the torturous journey of these stages, 4 or 5 stages. So you should not be scared about these stages. The first, he said, is indifference. The second is ridicule. The third is abuse. The fourth is repression. But the fifth is most important, respect. And therefore, I would suggest that for our pillars of Indian democracy, you have to be prepared for the tough path, for the Karma, for the Ekla Chalo, and for these 5 stages of different phases of opposition. Thank you very much indeed.
Hello. We'll welcome a few questions from the members of our audience.
Good afternoon. My question is, sir, what's your view regarding the blame game in Indian politics?
That's a very large question. Which kind of blame game would have to be first defined? But I will answer it as generally as I can, as generally your question is. I don't think you should be too much worried about the generality of that allegation. You know, sometimes the essence of democracy is that chaos, cacophony, so-called blame game, chick-chick, static. You cannot have a sanitized democracy as you have in Singapore, great country, but the democracy is sanitized, or you can't have a guided democracy as you have in parts of East Asia. But yes, you are right to the extent that, and it can't be imposed. I cannot pass a law, thou shalt not indulge in blame game. But you are right that the awareness has to increase by discussions like this, so that you indulge in one part of the blame game which is desirable, constructive blame game. Because, as I gave these 5 examples, Gandhiji's reform movement has to start with blame. There has to be constructive blame. And I think that happens ultimately by your own awareness, by your own, it can't be imposed. You call it a mature democracy, you call it the English democracy, the American democracy, or you call it the Indian democracy. These are evolutionary stages which will come by their own. There is no imposition possible, because then you will cease to be democracy itself.
Any other question?
Good afternoon, sir. So this question is about democracy in letter and in spirit. Now, how do we actually inculcate that among young people?
Well, for a start, having discussions like today more and more. And also, I think making them, you talk about young people in particular, I think making them aware. I think young people today means not today, the last 10 years, don't read enough. And the ones that read, don't read enough of the right thing. Now, right thing is a very wrong thing to say, because it's my right thing and your wrong thing, or vice versa. I don't mean that. Right thing means that they are not aware just of history. They're not aware just of the social movements. So, without being imposing, if I think you can make them read more of these things, little bit even, it completely changes your perspective, your horizon. I'm a great reader of biographies, for example. I'm talking personally, mostly I read biographies. Biographies include autobiographies, can be so inspiring that it is unbelievable. And there are some bad ones, there are some good ones. The hallmark of biography is candor. It is not there frequently. But then these are things which are instructive, which tell you the foibles and the failings and the achievements of ordinary people. My 2 all-time great sisters, because you asked, is the Cronin book on Napoleon. Napoleon in most of your minds is painted as the biggest villain, and so he was in my mind as well till I read the book. That's a typical effect of British imperialism, who painted Napoleon like that. And the second great book, of course, is Baldera's Long March to Freedom. So, these books do change your perspective.
We can accept one more question.
Can I ask a question, please?
You have more time, right?
Yeah, I can ask a question. Judges are appointed in
You need her permission. Not mine.
difficult permission to get. No, judges in US are appointed politically, but they have huge power or ethics to ensure that its law is applied uniformly, irrespective of their political appointment. Judges in USA are appointed on political party basis. You're loyal to Republican, you're loyal to Democrat, so whoever is in the power, they appoint the judges. So based on political belief rather than on other consideration. But when it comes to the application of law in USA, they are very fair, very, very fair, irrespective of their political appointments.
You're absolutely right, sir.
In India, we find nowadays judges are also getting some sort of political appointment. So do you think those judges are also very fair?
It's a perceptive question. In a nutshell, the question is, in a country which makes self-professedly political appointments, you yet find greater independence. And in a country which is supposed to appoint without regard to politics, you find greater political leanings. Let me answer it very pointedly. First and foremost, the American system is totally different. The constitution is different, the system is different. and they are intended to be my appointee as the president. I am the president, I can pick anybody I like, but there is a countervailing force given that the Senate can reject it in a very fierce Senate hearing. So A, the system is different, but B, you are right that they are appointed politically. In fact, it is common in the US Supreme Court that a man waits to resign or retire till he finds that the administration is of a political color which favors him, so that his replacement is of that political color. Having said that, the answer to your question is a single answer, which most people forget. There is a humongous independence given by one fact which we don't have in India, and possibly can't have in India. Guess what that is? Every federal judge in the US, every federal judge, include district federal judge, court of appeal judge, and US Supreme Court judge, is appointed for life. He need not leave even on his deathbed till he actually dies. Now most people forget this. It is surprising how much independence that gives. In other words, once you appoint me, only death do us part. There's no other way in which I can move unless I decide to go myself. So he doesn't care. He just doesn't care. That is the reason I just proposed to you post-65 sinecures, lollipops, and tanglings. Your post-retirement possibilities affect your pre-retirement conduct. There is no retirement there. Of course, only for federal judges, mind you. That is why you will find state-level judges in the US much less quality and much more dependent and much more politically colored. That is the only reason, and that was discussed in the Federalist Papers when the Constitution of US was being formed in 1787.
More and more on the rise, it seems that democracy seems to be becoming more and more irrelevant. I mean, let's see what's happening in Russia today. I mean, why is this war being fought? It seems that it's going to be very, very difficult to keep this ideology alive without paying a heavy price. I mean, and it's a trend all over the world now. More and more countries are trying to retain nationalism, like what's happening in our country, for instance. So, do we have to pay the price?
As you rightly said, I'm still searching for the question. But anyway, having said what you said, I think you're right. But it all depends on how you define a word, you know. Nationalism is not a bad thing at all. Just like federalism and secularism is not a bad thing at all, nationalism is a very desirable thing. What we are talking are distorted forms. I can distort secularism completely, and so can I distort nationalism. Then there's a third word, patriotism. These are very good words, desirable words. But if you want to distort them, if I start wearing my nationalism on my sleeve, and I start checking each of your sleeves, whether you are wearing it on your sleeve or not, and I start imposing my nationalism on you, that is not nationalism at all. So the answer is that you need to be having a collective consciousness about it. And the more you create aberrations, the more the collective consciousness actually rises. But yes, you are right, there are aberrations.
Our committee members? Yeah, please introduce yourself.
Is someone? Okay. So, sir, what is your view on post-retirement positions for other disciplines? For example, the CMD of a nationalized bank. Should they be allowed to take up positions? Because they give people power.
You have to make a distinction between constitutional posts, statutory posts, and executive posts. I didn't have time to go into all those details. What I was talking applies mainly about constitutional posts, because these posts are created with the intention of having fierce independence. How can you have a CHE who's looking over his shoulder as to what he will do after 65 or 67 or 70 or whatever? How can you have a chief election commissioner doing the same thing? For that matter, how can you have an army chief? Now, I would say that the same applies to most statutory posts also. I am not speaking on this subject alone, so I can give you many posts like that. There has to be a time when you stop. Part of the problem lies in the fact that we have very low retirement ages. You make these ages 70 and say nothing after that. That's good enough. You are retiring at 62 for High Court and 65 for Supreme Court. Then you are bound to have to give some kind of a post-retirement thing. So this has to be a holistic reform. Now, if you go further into your question and you have a purely executive appointment, that doesn't require that degree of independence so as to be culpable. There, even a cooling off period is good enough. Don't forget you have cooling off periods. So I can't be a MTNL chairman and join a telecom company tomorrow when I retire. But there's no reason why I can't join it after 2 years. You can make the cooling off period a little more. So these are degrees. These are degrees. But you need to calibrate it and you need to make a uniform rule. The problem in India is we have no uniform rule. You show the color of the hair or the lack of it and you decide.
Good afternoon, Dr. Singhvi. Thank you for a very insightful talk. On a lighter note, I believe you are a singer. So we'd like to hear a few lines from you.
I'm a very clever man. I married a singer. So I can consider my core competence.
Few lines.
You are already intimidating me so much I can't possibly be overwhelmed more. I don't think that's intended as a serious invitation, though I have a captive audience. Maybe some other time, probably. There is a saying, fools walk where angels fear to tread. And I intend to do that. But give me a minute, this is literally completely impromptu. But this might turn out to be a disaster because at least mentally you have to be prepared for these things. But anyway, if you are prepared to suffer, who am I to complain? कसमें वादे प्यार वफा सब बातें हैं बातों का क्या कसमें वादे प्यार वफा सब बातें हैं बातों का क्या कोई किसी का नहीं ये झूठे नाते हैं नातों का क्या कसमें वादे प्यार वफा सब बातें हैं बातों का क्या होगा मसीहा होगा मसीहा सामने तेरे फिर भी न तू बच पाएगा तेरा अपना खून ही आखिर तुझको आग लगाएगा आसमान में मिट्टी में मिल जाएगा, कसमें वादे प्यार वफा सब बातें हैं बातों का क्या. I can inflict torture on 2 more stanzas. So you should thank me that I'm not going on.
There's going to... No, please continue. Please do. So, you are a truly genius, topped in ICSC, such a talented person. Now, I will request our Vice President, Sujeta Mayor, to propose the vote of thanks.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Ladies Study Group, I would like to offer our grateful thanks to Dr. Abhishek Singhvi for agreeing to grace the special occasion of our award ceremony. It is an honor and privilege to have you with us today. Dr. Singhvi, your informative talk has been inspiring and we truly learned a lot. Your experience and field of knowledge is unparalleled, and we are all in admiration of that. Like every year, the Ladies Study Group Charitable Trust Award ceremony is the highlight. We would like to thank the jurors and all those who have contributed to make the ceremony a success. Thank you, esteemed guests and members, for joining us today. We thank the members of the press for the continued coverage. We appreciate the support and wonderful hospitality of ITC Shonar. Dr. Singhvi, we really have been grateful to you for being with us. May I now request our founder president, Mrs. Roma Bhagat, to come up and present a token of appreciation to Dr. Singhvi.
নীল হয়ে যাবে মাটিটা আইরিশ কাটতে আছে এইখানে মাথায় নীল হয়ে যাবে মানুষ দেখে নিয়ে যাবে আমি দুজনকে ধরছি নিয়ে রেখেছি স্যার আবার আচ্ছা আমি দুজনকে পেয়েছিলাম ফার্স্ট
Ladies and gentlemen, please do join us for lunch. Thank you. The committee can come up with the group photograph.
এরপর কোনো প্রোগ্রাম আছে? Dipankar. I didn't realize that Hari Babu